Hi, Terry here from Pokerrailbird.com, and today we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood aspects of Texas Hold'em, straight draws and suited connectors. We'll cover the four major types of straight draw hands, the odds of making a straight from pre-flop to river, and how to evaluate suited connectors in real time based on odds, position, and risk. We'll discuss how gap structure affects your draw equity, when suitedness adds value and when it's a trap, the difference between drawing hands and winning hands, and why chasing the wrong draw at the wrong time can quietly kill your stack. All the charts, graphics, and hand probability data we'll reference are available in the full article, Straight Draws and Suited Connectors, now posted at Pokerrailbird.com. Let's get started. So let's start with the basics. What exactly is a straight draw? In Nolan Texas Hold'em, a straight draw is when your hand has the potential to complete a 5-card straight, meaning 5 cards in sequential order. But not all straight draws are created equal. Understanding which type of draw you have and how strong it is makes a big difference in whether it's worth chasing. There are two main categories. Open-ended straight draw. This is when you have 4 consecutive cards and can complete a straight on either end. As an example, you hold the 8 of clubs and the 9 of spades, and the board comes 6 of diamond, 7 of hearts, and the queen of spades. Any 5 or 10 gives you the straight. Inside straight draw, sometimes called shot straight draw. This is when you're missing 1 card in the middle of a straight. Let's say you hold the 8 of spades and the 10 of clubs, and the board shows the 7 of hearts, the queen of spades, and the jack of diamonds. You need a 9, nothing else will do. For an open-ended straight draw, from flop to river, 31.5% chance to complete, or 2.17 to 1 odds, counting both the turn and river. For the turn only, your probability of hitting your straight is 17%, or 4.88 to 1 odds, and about the same for the river. It's important that you calculate your pot odds and hand probabilities by each card to come, rather than combined, as there is most likely a bet on both straights. The probability for the inside straight draw, from flop to river, 16.5% probability, or about 4.88 to 1 odds combined turn and river. For the turn only, the probability is about 9% or 10.75 to 1 odds, and about the same on the river. As we continue, we're going to go deeper not just into these probabilities, but into how they relate to hand selection, position, equity, and risk. Let's now shift our focus to something fundamental to straight-making hands, the structure of your starting cards. When it comes to making straights in poker, not all straight draws are created equal. In fact, the likelihood of making a straight depends almost entirely on 2 things. 1. The number of gaps between your 2 cards. 2. Where your hand sits in relation to the straight-making grid. We'll start by looking at 4 major categories of straight draw hands, based on the number of gaps between the 2 cards. No gap, hands like Jack 10 or 8 7. 1 gap, hands like 9 7 or Queen 10. 2 gap, hands like Queen 9 or 6 3. 3 gap, hands like 8 4 or Queen 8. The more gaps there are, the fewer straight combinations are possible, and the worse the hand performs over the long run. As we'll see later, 3-gap hands are rarely worth playing and are often better classified as either junk or weak high-card holdings with little straight value. But it doesn't stop there. Each of these categories also contains 3 subtypes based on how centrally located the hand is within the straight-making grid. In the middle offers the highest number of straight possibilities. Near the end, some straight potential, but limited. At the end, only one way to make a straight. Let's take a moment to visualize this. If you hold Jack 10, a no-gap hand in the middle, you have 4 different ways to make a straight. 7, 8, 9, 10 Jack. 8, 9, 10 Jack Queen. 9, 10 Jack Queen King. 10 Jack Queen King Ace. But if you hold King Queen, a near-the-end no-gap hand, you only have 2 ways to make a straight. 9, 10 Jack Queen King. 10 Jack King Queen Ace. And if you hold Ace King, an at-the-end hand, there's just one possible straight. 10 Jack Queen King Ace. It breaks down like this for in the middle hands. No gap 4 straight combos. 1 gap 3 straight combos. 2 gap 2 straight combos. 3 gap 1 straight combo. These numbers translate directly into your real-world equity. A no-gap hand in the middle, like 8-7, has roughly a 9% chance, about 10 to 1 odds, of making a straight by the river. As you add gaps or shift toward the edges of the grid, that probability drops significantly. And while hands like ace-king or ace-queen are technically connected, they are generally played for high card value, not straight potential. Any straight you make with these is a bonus, not the goal. So in this section, we'll walk through each of the four main categories: no gap, one gap, two gap, and three gap, and for each, we'll break down how many ways the hand can make a straight, the odds of flopping a straight draw, the probability of completing the draw by the river, and most importantly, when these hands are mathematically profitable and when they're not. We're only discussing straight potential here. We'll cover suitedness, flush draws, and combo equity in the next section. Let's begin with the strongest structural category for straight-making hands, no-gap connectors. These are hands where your two whole cards are sequential in rank, like Jack 10, 9-8, or 8-7. There's no missing card in between, which gives these hands the most potential combinations for making a straight. But not all no-gap hands are created equal. Their strength also depends on where they sit in the straight-making grid. Are they in the middle, near the end, or at the end? In the middle, such as Jack 10, 10-9, 9-8. These hands are right in the center of the straight grid, and that gives them the maximum number of straight combinations, which is 4. As an example, Jack 10 has 4 possible ways to make a straight: 7-8-9 Jack 10, 8-9 10 Jack Queen, 9-10 Jack Queen King, 10 Jack Queen King Ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 9%, 10.11 to 1 odds. These are the most structurally valuable hands for straight making. They're highly flexible, hit a range of boards, and offer disguised strength when they connect. Near the end, hands like King Queen or 3-2. These hands are getting closer to the edge of the straight grid, and as a result, they have only 2 possible straight combinations. Example King Queen, which has only 2 possible ways to make a straight: 9-10 Jack Queen King, 10 Jack Queen King Ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 5%, 19 to 1 odds. Still playable, but there's a noticeable drop in flexibility and straight-making potential compared to middle position no-gap hands. At the end, hands like Ace-King or Ace-2. These hands are at the far edge of the straight grid. There's only one straight they can possibly make. Take Ace-Kings, there is only one way to make a straight: 10 Jack Queen King Ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 3%, 32.33 to 1 odds. Hands like Ace-King and Ace-Queen are frequently played and often played aggressively, but their straight equity is minimal. You're playing these hands for high card strength, not for straight potential. Any straight you hit is more of a bonus than a core reason to play the hand. Key takeaways: no gap, middle position hands are the best straight making hands in poker. As you move closer to the ends of the grid, your straight equity declines steeply. Even though hands like Ace-King and Ace-Queen are strong, but they're not strong because of straight potential. It's not just about whether your cards are connected, it's about how many valid paths to a straight your hand can realistically follow. In the next section, we'll take a step down the ladder and break down one-gap connectors. Next up are one-gap connectors, hands where there's a single rank missing between your 2 cards. These hands still have decent straight making potential, especially when they fall in the middle of the grid. But compared to no-gap connectors, you've now lost one possible straight path, and that drop in flexibility shows up immediately in the math. In the middle one-gap connectors like Jack 9 or 9-7. These hands sit squarely in the middle of the straight grid and offer 3 different ways to make a straight. Jack 9 as an example: 7-8-9 10 Jack, 8-9 10 Jack Queen, 9-10 Jack Queen King. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 7%, 13.29 to 1 odds. These hands are playable and can deliver disguised value, but they don't connect as often as no-gap hands. With fewer combo paths, you'll hit fewer flops and face more marginal spots post-flop. Near the end, hands like King Jack or 2-4. These hands are one gap off, but skewed toward the edge of the straight grid. They offer only 2 straight combinations, same as near the end no-gap hands, but with weaker structural equity due to the gap. Take King Jack as an example. There are only 2 ways to make a straight: 9-10 Jack Queen King, 10 Jack Queen King Ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 5%, 19 to 1 odds. These hands often look strong because of the face cards involved, but the gap restricts their draw potential. In most situations, they'll need to make top pair or hit a very specific flop to justify continued investment. At the end, ace-queen or ace-3. These one-gap hands are at the edge of the straight grid and have only one possible straight combination. Ace-queen, as an example, has one way to make a straight. 10, jack, queen, king, ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 3%. 32.33 to 1 odds. While technically connectors, hands like ace-queen are not played for their straight potential. They're played for their high card value. Any straight they hit is more of a bonus than a strategic goal. Key takeaways. Middle position, one-gap connectors still have value, but are less flexible than no-gap hands. The closer you are to the ends of the grid, the more your hand depends on high card value rather than structure. Many one-gap hands, especially those with face cards, look prettier than they perform. Two-gap connectors are where the structural integrity of your hand really starts to weaken. These are hands with two ranks missing between your whole cards, and while some are still playable under the right conditions, their ability to form straights is noticeably diminished. Let's look at in the middle two-gap connectors, such as Queen 9 or 10-7. These are two-gap hands that still fall within the center of the straight-making grid. Despite the gaps, they can form a straight in two ways. As an example, Queen 9 has two ways to make a straight. 8-9, 10, jack, queen. 9-10, jack, queen, king. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 6%. 15.67 to 1 odds. Structurally, these hands are already operating at half the capacity of no-gap connectors in the middle. You'll flop fewer draws, and when you do connect, it's often less disguised or less profitable, especially in multi-way pots or against strong ranges. Near the end hands like King 10 or 5-2. These hands still offer two straight combinations, but they sit closer to the outer edge of the grid. That restricts their flexibility and increases the chance of kicker trouble or getting outdrawn when you do connect. For example, King 10, you have two ways to make a straight. 9-10, jack, queen, king. 10, jack, queen, king, ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 6%. 15.67 to 1 odds. These hands are often overplayed by players who like the appearance of Broadway-style cards, but the underlying structure just doesn't support frequent wins. More often than not, you'll be left with marginal equity and difficult decisions on later straights. At the end hands such as ace-jack or ace-4. Now we're at the edge of the straight grid. Ace-jack has only one path to a straight. 10, jack, queen, king, ace. Straight completion probability, pre-flop to river, 4%. 24 to 1 odds. As with ace-king and ace-queen, ace-jack is played primarily for its high card value, top pair decent kicker. While it technically qualifies as a connector, the straight potential is a bonus at best, not a reliable part of your game plan. Key takeaways. Two-gap hands are far more limited than they appear. Even when located in the middle of the grid, they offer just two straight combinations, and that shows up in both equity and profitability. Near-the-end versions often entice players with face cards, but fall flat in actual straight production. At the end, two-gap hands like ace-jack are almost never played for their straight potential. Coming up, three gaps, and there's nothing good to say about them. Let's stop here and draw the line. You won't find a chart in the section, and that's intentional, because three-gap hands aren't worth trucking. They're worth folding. What are three-gappers? Three-gap hands have three full ranks separating your whole cards. Examples include hands like 10-6, 9-5, and Queen 8. These hands sit at the absolute bottom of the straight-making hierarchy, and they behave exactly like the math says they will. They rarely connect. When they do, they put you in bad spots. And most of all, they seduce bad decisions from otherwise good players. Let's give these hands just enough respect to bury them properly. Top of the trash heap, hands like 10-6 or 9-5. Straight completion probability, 5%. Odds, 19 to 1. Sounds okay? Now ask yourself, what's your kicker when you hit your 10? A 6? You want to bet with that? The rest of the dumpster, hands like Queen 8 or Jack 7. Straight completion probability, 4%. Odds, 24 to 1. The real trap, false hope. These hands are dangerous not because they never win, but because they win just often enough to make you think you're onto something. You hit middle pair. You turn a good shot. You chase a dream, and suddenly, your session's profit is gone, or worse, you're rebuying. Three-gap hands are not speculative. They're leaks. They don't connect often enough to justify pre-flop investment. When they do hit, they often get outkicked, outdrawn, or dominated. And in most cases, you're not building stacks, you're dripping chips. Yes, they will win once in a while. So will ace high. You can spend your poker life chasing possibility, or you can start playing probability. These hands won't make you a winner. They'll make you a believer in bad ideas. Don't track them. Don't limp them. Just fold them. Now that we've broken down straight draws by structure, no gap, one gap, two gap, and the danger zone of three gap hands, let's turn our attention to a feature that gets far more credit than it deserves: suitedness. Suited connectors have become one of the most over-romanticized hand categories in poker. People see two cards of the same suit and immediately think, hey, I could make a flush. But let's be clear right out of the gate. Flush potential is not the same as playability. What suitedness actually adds? When you're holding suited connectors, your hand gains. A 6.5% chance to make a flush by the river, 118 to 1 to flop it. A 10% chance to flop a flush draw. And if you flop that draw, about a 35% chance to complete it by the river. Flushes do happen, but they happen less than most players think and win less than most players hope. That said, when suitedness is paired with good structure, like no gap or one gap hands in the middle of the straight grid, it creates combo potential for straight draw plus flush draw, top pair plus backdoor flush, blocker plus board coverage, and most importantly, fold equity in semi-bluff spots. When all those things come together, suited connectors can become powerful speculative weapons, especially in position and with deep stacks. What suitedness does not do: turn trash into treasure, justify calling bad opens, rescue three-gap hands from being fundamentally flawed, protect you from kicker problems, or make a weak hand strong just because it's pretty. If your only reason for playing the hand is, well, it's suited, then fold it. Because while suited connectors can be profitable in the right situations, they're not automatic green lights. Let's start at the top with no gap suited connectors, where combo potential is highest and real value actually exists. This is the strongest suited connector category and the only one you could call reliably profitable under the right conditions. No gap suited connectors combine maximum structural flexibility for straights with added flush potential. And when those two roads overlap, you get the power of combo draws, the kind that can win big pots or force folds with semi-bluffs. But even here, the probabilities matter. So let's look at the math behind the hype. In the middle suited connectors like Jack 10 or 10-9, probability to make a straight by the river is 9% or 10.11 to 1 odds. To make a flush, 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds. You will flop a flush draw about 10% of the time or 9 to 1 odds. If you do flop a flush draw, you will complete the flush by the river about 35% of the time or 1.86 to 1 odds. The total probability of hitting either a flush or a straight by the river is about 15% or 5.67 to 1 odds. These are the premium examples of this category. They sit dead center in the straight-making grid and bring all three weapons to the table: straight potential, flush potential, and combo draw opportunities. These hands can flop open-ended straight draws. Flop flush draws flop both straight and flush draws at once. But the key isn't only in hitting a draw, it's also in how much fold equity you gain when you do. That's what gives these hands their power. You're not just drawing, you're applying pressure while holding real equity. With near the end, one gap suited connectors, such as King-Queen or 3-2, we lose some flexibility. These hands can still make a straight or flush, but they only have two straight combos and are more vulnerable to domination when the flush comes in. As an example, King-Queen suited has a 5% probability or 19 to 1 odds of making a straight. However, as with any suited hand, it has a 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds of making a flush by the river. In total, near the end suited connectors have 11% or 8.09 to 1 odds of making either a straight or a flush by the river. These hands still have combo potential, but they're more board dependent. If the board doesn't cooperate, you're often left with weak top pair or awkward middle strength, and that's not a spot you want to build pots from. At the end suited connectors, Ace-King or Ace-Deuce. Ace-King is a premium high-card hand, no question, but not because of its straight or flush potential. Its role is top pair top kicker with backup options, not a primary drawing hand. A suited hand like Ace-King or Ace-2 has a 3% chance or 32.33 to 1 odds of making a straight by the river and a 6.5% probability or 14.4 to 1 odds. The total probability for at the end suited connectors is about 9% or 10.11 to 1 odds of making either a straight or a flush by the river. Key takeaways. Middle position, no-gap suited connectors are the strongest speculative hands in poker. They offer maximum combo draw potential, which leads to fold equity, bluff equity, trap potential. Near the end and at the end hands may be strong in other ways, but their combo potential declines sharply. Don't confuse suited with profitable. Structure comes first, always. When played in position, against the right opponents, and with room to maneuver, no-gap suited connectors can do serious work. But they still miss more often than they hit, and you need the discipline to fold when they don't connect. One-gap suited connectors still carry playable value, especially if they sit near the middle of the straight grid. They've lost one straight-making combination compared to no-gap hands, but they still retain the potential for combo draws and disguised equity. The key here is understanding that suitedness adds power only when the structure is already sound. If the foundation is weak, suitedness just makes the fall more expensive. In the middle, suited one-gap connectors, such as Jack-9 or 10-8, have 3 ways to make a straight. While not as strong as no-gap hand, they can still produce combo draws and gold equity on the right boards. As an example, Jack-9 suited has a 7% or 13.29 to 1 odds to make a straight, pre-flop to river, along with 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds of making a flush, pre-flop to river. The probability to flop a flush draw is 10% or 9 to 1 odds, and to complete the flush by the river is 35% or 1.86 to 1 odds. In total, there is a 14% probability or 6.14 to 1 odds of completing either a straight or a flush by the river. These hands are still speculative weapons when played in position or in deep-stacked multi-way pots. Hands that are near the end, like King-Jack or 4-2, can only make a straight in 2 ways and are increasingly prone to domination when they make a flush. While still playable, you need to be careful about kicker problems and shallow equity. As an example, King-Jack has a 5% probability or 19 to 1 odds of making a straight, and a 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds of making a flush, pre-flop to river. In total, there is a 12% probability or 7.33 to 1 odds of making either a flush or a straight by the river. These hands are fine in some late position situations, but don't make the mistake of playing them out of habit. The pretty face cards are a trap, especially when you start chasing weak top pair or chasing draws that don't justify a call. At the end one-gap hands, like Ace-Queen or Ace-3, have only one possible straight combination, and are played almost entirely for their high card value. Their suitedness can add backup potential, but very rarely changes how they should be played strategically. As an example, Ace-Queen has a 4% probability or 24 to 1 odds to make a straight, pre-flop to river, and a 6.5% probability or 14.4 to 1 odds to make a flush. Combined probability to make either a flush or a straight is 10% or 9 to 1 odds. These hands look great, and they're often played as premium holdings. But their flush potential is secondary, and their straight potential is limited. Key takeaways. Middle position one-gap suited connectors still offer strong disguised potential and combo opportunities. Near the end versions require more caution and positional awareness, especially with kicker risk. At the end, hands like Ace-Queen suited are played for high card strength. Flushes and straights are just insurance policies. Suitedness does not turn bad structure into value. It only enhances hands that were already worth playing. Two-gap connectors, even when suited, offer limited straight potential and rely almost entirely on flush value to justify play. But let's be blunt. Flush value alone isn't enough. You'll miss your draws far more often than you'll hit them, and when you do hit, especially with low or mid-suited cards, you're often up against a higher flush. These are hands that might seem playable in late position, but they're usually not worth the chips they tempt you to invest. In the middle two-gap suited connectors, hands like Jack-8 or 10-7 Sit near the center of the straight grid. The probability of making a straight within the middle two gap connectors is about 6% or 15.67 to 1 odds. The flush draw remains the same 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds as we've already discussed. Combined probability to make a flush or a straight preflop to river is 12% or 7.33 to 1 odds. These hands might connect with the board, but more often, they flop bottom pair or a weak draw that costs you money to chase. Without fold equity or deeper stacks, there's not much long-term value here. Near the end, suited connectors like King 10 or 5-2 still have two possible straight combos, but you're pushing toward the outer edge of the grid. And kicker problems become a real concern if you hit top pair or a weak flush. The probability of making a straight with these hands is about 6% or 15.67 to 1 odds. The flush probability remains at 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds. Combined probability to make a flush or straight preflop to river is about 12% or 7.33 to 1 odds. Suitedness isn't a cure for bad structure, and that's exactly what these hands are. They'll occasionally catch a board, but unless you're up against extremely soft opponents or deep stacks, you're usually better off folding. At the end two gap suited connectors, like Ace-Jack or Ace-4, have only one path for a straight, with a probability of 4% or 24 to 1 odds. Suitedness give it potential for the nut flush, with a 6.5% or 14.4 to 1 odds of hitting. Combined probability for making either a straight or a flush is 10% or 9 to 1 odds, pre-flop to river. The Ace-Jack is often played aggressively, and it's fine to do so for high card value. But you're not calling raises pre-flop because it's suited. That's backwards logic. The straight is a long shot, and the flush happens just often enough to get players into trouble. Key takeaways. Two gap suited hands flirt with the line between speculative and costly. Suitedness helps only if you're playing deep, in position, and with a read. Most of these hands should be folded preflop, especially if your only reason to play is because it's suited. If you flop bottom pair or a weak flush draw, you're often drawing thin and dominated. Three gap suited hands, pretty but poison. If you followed along this far, you already know. Structure matters. Three gap suited hands? They have none. They look good in the window, maybe a suited ace, or a king with some gap, and they tempt you with just enough shine to make bad decisions feel justifiable. But don't confuse looks with value. These are classic trouble hands. The flush fantasy and why it fails. Let's be honest. When you play suited hands, like Jack 7 or 9-6, you're not playing for structure. You're chasing a flush fantasy. The reality? 0.8% probability or a 118 to 1 odds to flop a flush. 10% probability or 9 to 1 odds to flop a flush draw. 35% chance or 1.86 to 1 odds to complete that draw if you flop it. And don't forget, there's a 35% probability that another player also has two cards the same suit as yours, likely with a higher ranking card than you. That means even when your flush comes in, you're often second best. In reality, you are drawing dead from the start. The false promise of high cards. Let's look at some common three-gap suited hands players try to justify. Ace 10, King 9, Queen 8. On paper, they feel connected, high, or just too pretty to fold. But in reality, you're working with one way to make a straight, which means you have about a 10% probability or 9 to 1 odds to make a straight pre-flop to river. A 6.5% probability or 14.421 odds of making a flush by the river. And far more often, the possibility of hitting top pair with a bad kicker. So what's really happening when you call preflop with these hands? You're betting on low probability outcomes, mediocre flops with kicker problems, reverse implied odds, and the hope that your opponents play worse than you. That's not poker. That's wishful thinking in a suited wrapper. If you're playing hands like these, you're not following a strategy, you're following a feeling. And feelings don't build bankrolls. When in doubt, fold it. When you're mesmerized just because it's suited, fold it. Let someone else light chips on fire chasing the rainbow. By now, you've got the structure. You've seen the math. You've seen what works and what doesn't. But let's lock it in. Here are the most common mistakes players still make with straight draws and suited connectors, even when they know better. Chasing hands with no structure just because they're suited. Overvaluing low straight draws that are easily dominated. ignoring kicker problems when top pair finally hits, trusting hope instead of math, and the big one, thinking sometimes it works is good enough. These hands can look tempting, but poker isn't about what might happen, it's about what usually does. If you remember just one thing from this entire breakdown, make it this: structure drives value. Suited doesn't make it strong. And sometimes isn't a game plan, it's a leak. You've got the numbers. You've seen the strategy. You've heard the warnings. If you want to take it further, head over to Pokerrailbird.com. In the Toolkits menu, you'll find charts showing the exact odds and probabilities for every straight draw and suited connector, hand by hand. Keep them open. Study them. Make them part of your decision process. And just in case you're still tempted to chase that one last flush, just in case you're holding on to that Queen-8 suited thinking one time, let me leave you with an old Vegas proverb, one every seasoned player learns the hard way. Those who chase straights and flushes go home on Greyhound buses. That about sums it up. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And visit Pokerrailbird.com for more in-depth breakdowns, strategy articles, downloadable tools, and player forums. I'm Terry Wood, and I'll see you at the tables.